Welcome, my beautiful people, to the first of what are going to be many free online courses structured around a series of lectures that are going to bring you deeper inside the world of sport history and sport philosophy from my vantage point, the sport philosopher and a former sport historian. And the real thrust of these lectures and of these free courses is how to take things from the intellectual realm in the world of sport, how we talk, how we think, how we analyze, how we debate around the meaning, utility, and value of sport, directly into our lives. So, philosophy without application, to me, is an interesting experiment, but it's not useful to live a meaningful and purposeful life. And as I've slowly transitioned away from being a university professor, which was my old job, to my current role as a coach, consultant, and trainer, it really is all about what we can do in action with the ideas that matters the most. And this isn't just something that I think about, but is something that is deeply intertwined with the long philosophy and history of sport as an activity that can unleash our greatest individual potential. So, with that said, my first series goes all the way back to the genesis of the idea that athletic competition, physical training is a vehicle, and perhaps the greatest vehicle that we have to improve ourselves, generate moral virtue, strengthen our characters, and aim at the greatest potential that we have in our lives. And that comes from the ancient philosophers, Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle, from the classical Greek world. So we've got 5 lectures in this first course, in this first series, which I'm calling Physical Training from the Ancient Philosophers. Lecture 1, where we are right now, this is simply just the introduction to the ancient philosophy of athleticism. So, what is athleticism? It's this ancient idea about the wisdom that we can gain from participating in sports and physical training. Athleticism, most basic definition, it's a positive to individuals and societies to involve ourselves in physical training and athletic competition. That this is an overall good for individuals in terms of physical health, in terms of mental sharpness and acuity, but also spiritual fortitude and moral character. And that as individuals develop themselves, we're actually going to be unleashing the true potential of us all together in society and sort of in our larger cultures. And this wasn't just a static idea, it wasn't just in the realm of thoughts, it was practically used and was actually practically developed from action. So in the ancient Greek world, athletics were used to train leaders. Leaders in war, leaders in politics, leaders in business, leaders in philosophy, mathematics, in the arts. One of the lines I often go to when talking about the role of the athletes in the ancient Greek world is to highlight the other occupations that the athletes were also responsible for. So the athlete was the farmer, the athlete was the statesman, the athlete was the soldier, the athlete voted in the assembly, right? And it wasn't politics, it wasn't business, it wasn't even war or philosophy that truly developed all of the characteristics needed to be an effective leader. It was athletics. So athletics were seen to develop individuals to their greatest potential, right? So inside of us, right, we're kind of like these, I like to think of the analogy of a seed, right? A seed, and I often use a tomato plant, right? A seed for a tomato plant can only grow to become a tomato plant, right? Everything that that's inside that seed is everything that that plant will become, just like you, right? We've got a DNA, right? We've got a physical potential, we've got a physical capacity, but it's the mix of that potential with our environment and how we cultivate it that is going to determine how high we grow. Just like that tomato plant, if I don't put it in good soil, if I don't water it, if I don't give it access to a lot of great sunlight, it's not going to grow very tall. And if it does produce fruit, it's not going to taste sweet. It's not going to be something that I'm going to want to put on my salad or make a sauce out of. So similarly, right, athletics is this training mechanism for individual potential, right? Within us, we have the seeds of greatness, but we need to work hard to achieve that. And athletic training was seen to be the best avenue that any individual could follow to obtain that potential. And it's not just in the realm of the body, clearly, because we're not interested, and the ancient Greeks weren't interested in this idea of might makes right, that it's just the strongest individual, the person who can run the fastest or hit the hardest or kill the most in battle, right? There's a philosophic quality, there's a quality of justice, of honesty, of discipline, of humility, of excellence and achievement, right? That come to us from the world of sports. And it's no accident that the great philosophers would oftentimes use sports as excellent analogies and examples of the deep philosophic principles they were trying to express and communicate out to the larger society. So when we're talking about athleticism, right, we are talking about a deep, deep idea with thousands of years of history and some of the hardest hitting thinkers who ever lived on this planet are behind. Now, before we dive into each of the individual philosophers and their contribution to how we in the modern world can apply this ideal of athleticism in our own lives to unleash our own potential and to generate strong moral character within us, we have to understand the basic building blocks of that philosophy, because there are other philosophies that say, sport, physical activity, maybe not even neutral, but might even be bad, might even tilt us towards immorality, towards vice, and to sort of like the bad things in the world. So if we believe that athleticism is a positive for individuals in society, there is a concept that is underneath that effectively says, the body and the mind can be trained and understood together as opposed to separate. And that's this concept known as embodiment, right? An embodiment, at its most basic, body and mind united, right? That we aren't a body elevated over a mind, and we're not a mind elevated over a body, but we are a mind and a body in harmony and in balance together. And the ancient Greeks aimed sport directly at this connection and strengthening this connection. It was the mental resiliency and spiritual fortitude of submitting yourself to the sacrifices, discipline, and struggles and toil of athletic training. And it was also the mental acuity, the wit, the sagacity, the creativity, the imagination, the daring of the athlete in competition and in training to outsmart, outwit, and gain an advantage over their opponent. And this ideal of body and spirit and mind all uniting in their greatest in athletic competition and training directs us to what I believe is the deep and true purpose of sport, which is that they are religious in nature and also in practice. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when we are utilizing sports, physical activity, exercise, competition to its greatest potential, we are aiming at the spiritual plane. We're operating in the spiritual realm, and we are elevated above both the mind and the body. And I was actually was actually thinking about this just a little bit earlier today. And like, why is that the case? Well, when we think about what the athletes give away and what they gain from that, right? Religion is always based on this idea of sacrifice, right? Giving something away in order to gain, right? What does the athlete give? The athlete gives their body. The athlete gives their mind, right? Think about all of the professional athletes who you know that retire and are these paragons of health? Like when they're hanging up the cleats? No, their bodies are broken. Many of them are forced to retire because their bodies are so badly broken they cannot compete or train with the rigor and vigor that they did when they were younger. And athletes are happy to make this trade. That's the whole point, right? They willingly trade their bodies in order to achieve glory, in order to achieve something that speaks to something deep inside of themselves that's related to passion, love, expression, achievement, and excellence. And if we are thinking about sport as a way to learn more about our own potential, and that also gives us the actions and behaviors to live a proper moral life that is aimed towards, let's say, realizing the divine spark that's within us, well, how could they not be religious? How could they not be related to the spirit? So I'm not saying that always sports are related to this plane, but if we want to utilize them for their best and understand them at their deepest and truest nature, well, they belong to the spiritual plane. So what we're going to be doing in this lecture course is reviving these ancient ideals and practices for modern application, right? Because these ideas have legs, they are deep, they are powerful, but we cannot practice them in the exact same way people did over 2,500 years ago. We just don't live in that world. We have a different culture, we have a different environment and context. And so we've got to sort of fit that square peg of the past into the round hole of the present. And we're going to do that by going through each of the big three philosophers in the ancient Greek world and their unique contributions, both to the idea of athleticism, but importantly, how that relates to the idea of embodiment, that our bodies and minds are sort of these co-equal parts of us. And so the philosophers and their ideas that we're going to be discussing in the next couple of lectures. Number one, Socrates. We're going to talk about this idea of dialogue or exchange or a back and forth and how that reveals truth. Plato, we're going to talk about beauty, aesthetic appreciation of form, of motion, of feeling, of expression, and how, again, that relates to truth. And then finally, Aristotle, and Aristotle's, he's my guy, so I'm a little bit biased here, but he's going to talk to us about moral virtue and character and where we should be aiming ourselves, right? And it's not just about athleticism, but about this connection between athleticism and the ideal of embodiment. Because once we internalize this ideal of embodiment, that body and mind are trained together in balance and harmony, that's where we unlock the ancient secret that we can then bring to the modern world and then apply to our own modern context. So this is the basic outline of the way the next couple of lectures are going to go. We got one on Socrates, we got one on Plato, we got one on Aristotle. And then the final lecture is going to be how do we bring all that ancient wisdom from these three giants of philosophy, again, to live better lives through physical training and athletic competition. And I would be a bad prof if there weren't some level of assignment or homework or prompt on how we can start thinking about these ideas and utilizing them in our lives through direct and conscious action and application. So, reflection activity. These are just some broad and open questions that I would like for you to consider before moving on to the next lecture. So, there's a couple ways that you can go about this reflection activity. You can create a journal or a document where you go from lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3. And if you're interested in getting some feedback, let me know in the comments of the video. Or if you simply want to place your responses in the comments of the video, I will directly respond here. But if you're looking for some more private feedback, let me know in the comments below, and we'll figure out a way for you to send me whatever it is you're writing, and for me to give you some feedback and to help give you some advice. So, reflection activity for lecture 1. How does sport bring your mind and body together? Basic, broad question. It could be a sentence, it could be a page, could be a few words, doesn't matter. Whatever's kind of speaking to you about how you want to answer, that's how you should answer. And again, the whole point of this lecture series is to take ideas and bring them down to the world of experience. So, do you have an experience or a story that proves this to you in terms of sport being a place to unite body and mind together? Because once we internalize, as I mentioned before, this ideal of embodiment, that's going to be the key unlock into applying this ancient wisdom for our modern purposes. So go ahead, think about it for a little bit, drop in the comments below either your answers, or if you want to get in touch on a private channel, and we can certainly make that happen. I hope you enjoyed this first lecture, and I'm really excited to see you in number 2, where we talk about the man, Socrates.